Hello again, I am Bloody, and as of tomorrow, we'll be officially 3 weeks into Monster Hunter Wilds since launch, and we're still filtering and refining opinions, hot takes, or maybe warm takes by this point, I suppose, about various topics of discussion and division in the community, as a generalized consensus about the game in general and specific aspects of it starts settling down out of the frothy suspension of opinion precipitates. It's too early in the morning for science words. But now that a more significant number of players have had time to make their way through to the end game, let's take another whack at the difficulty argument. Is the game, indeed, quote-unquote, too easy? Or, more specifically, easier than the games have been? Now, I'm going to dive down on a couple of really specific things in this video, things I haven't talked about yet, at least not in detail, and specifically those specific things are the Hunter Companions, the Palicos, and the Seikret. And let's all keep in mind, by the way, for the record, just saying, and I'll come back to this by the end of the video, we are talking about the launch situation of the game, the launch level base game stuff here, the most limited, the smallest version of this game that will ever exist. We haven't even got Title Update 1 yet, which arrives in just a few weeks' time, early in April they're telling us, which promises a new level of monster difficulty, monsters of formidable strength, above tempered. So that is our context here. That's what's still awaiting us. Now, before we bite down on all of that Seikret and Palicos stuff, let me front load you here real quick with the more generalized stuff, because we kind of have to set that up, don't we? Stuff I've talked about in earlier videos, which I still stand by 100% at this point, so I don't need to reiterate them in detail. I'll just link them for you in the down below, you can check them out. But again, just real quick, the general challenge of the monsters in this game, and I mean very specifically the monsters in isolation of the other mechanics. So we're talking HP pools, we're talking move sets, we're talking aggression levels, danger, elemental stuff, that kind of thing. And as I've already pointed out in those earlier videos, I think that this stuff is directly in line with both of the other games from the last decade of releases of Monster Hunter, what we might call the modern games, if you will, World and Rise. Because in playing through both World and Rise immediately before Wilds launched, playthroughs I live streamed, by the way, which means I have locally recorded video evidence of this that I could go back to and examine, and indeed I did go back to and examine, I've already demonstrated that the average hunt times in Wilds were in fact exactly in line with the other games. The hunts were not faster or easier in Wilds. On the subject of carting, I didn't cart in Wilds at all until I got midway into high rank, and that is a common story amongst people, at the very least those who've played before, which is, by the way, again, exactly the same situation as both recent runs through World and Rise. And in Rise, I didn't even wear any armor at all until high rank, so I could deliberately up the challenge of the low rank story mode stuff. And in World, I didn't upgrade a single piece of armor until I was in Master rank, the Iceborne expansion stuff. So no, in that respect, I do not think Wilds is easier. It is factually not, demonstrably not. These are not subjective things I'm talking about. These are objective truths. I can support this stuff with literal evidence. I have the recordings of the gameplay of all three games. I looked at them, I checked them, I compared them. I can and have shown the evidence of these claims. It is not up for debate. It is facts on the table. However, on the subject of helpers, our non-human hunting companions, the Palicos and the Seikret, I think critics do have some strong points here, and this is very much up for debate. So, to frame that side for me, rather conveniently, today's Third Fleet podcast from popular Monster Hunter content creator and Gunlance whore. That wasn't in the script. I don't know why I called him a Gunlance whore. I think you should stick with it, though. That's your new branding, Ruri. You're a Gunlance whore. But they touched on these very issues on today's podcast in a way that's real damn useful for me to chuck in here as a framing device. And I do strongly encourage you to go watch the full podcast after this too. I've chopped this segment down a bit just so we can get to the point quicker, but you really should hear their full chat about it. And indeed go subscribe and all that sort of stuff, because his stuff's worth watching. I've been up for years.
We need to talk about Palicos and Seikret, because I think both of them are somewhat problematic in different ways.
Yeah, it's too strong.
How can we fix the Palicos? I think that the idea of giving them every single tool.
You should choose which one you want. Like, I'm going to be a plunder rank.
You should have
I'm going to be a giant wasp user. Like, tell me what my speciality is going to be and let them decide, because that's always been the case in every game.
I think that the only way to fix what they have right now, and people are going to hate me for saying this, is going to be nerf the current Palico by 50%.
Is it
and then give it back to him in the form of a specialization, but only for the tools you specialize in.
The functional is just
healing,
way too
good.
good.
The healing is absolutely cracked, and his AI is so good that every single time a monster gets the skull, he's like, "Oh, I put a trap down."
Boom.
I'm like,
and his
how convenient.
placement is so good.
How convenient.
Do you also notice that, like, the AI knows where the monster is more likely to run off, and, like, he'll place it right. He places it exactly where that monster is going to go.
Right. So like I said, I chopped that up a bit for brevity, but the point is clear. And I think that basically everyone who has played Monster Hunter before, either long-term or just, one other game, will agree with Rory and Gaijin, and indeed me. The Palico is correct. Correct. Why am I talking so weird today? Sorry. It's way too powerful, way too flexible, and while I appreciate the cleverness of their new AI, especially compared to the older games where I'd sometimes scream in pantomimed exaggeration for memes' sake about how stupid my Palico is being and how useless they are, the combination of this new highly adaptable, clever AI behavior with the fact that the Palicos are now jacks of all trades, throwing down heals and buffs and clearing status elements and laying traps and firing flash cages and attacking and using offensive tools and using distractions all at once, all of the time, and all at peak efficiency makes them way OP, like crazy overpowered. Back in World, you could make your Palico surprisingly strong. In fact, a few content creators even made gimmick builds that often call Pokemon trainer builds, or something along those lines, where the idea was to make yourself, the hunter, as defensive and immortal as possible, but then stay relatively passive in the hunt, or even just go completely AFK, while letting your buffed up Palico do the actual monster fight. And it was surprisingly, practical is the wrong word, but it worked. Like, your Palico could take down a monster all on its own within 20 minutes. But here's the thing about World Palicos. They could only carry and use one specialist gadget at a time. So they could be a healer for you, or a flasher, or a distraction, or gather extra monster parts with the plunder blade, that was really useful, or they could buff you, or they could do burst damage, but never ever all of that stuff at once like Wild's Palicos can. Personally, I loved the way Rise handled the Palico variety. You could hire multiple Palico and choose their individual specializations, and then you could select from a group of RNG rolled skills within each specialization. So that was all really fun to engage with. It was a wonderful system, lots of variety and choice and combinations. And finding and then training up and carefully equipping the perfect Palicos for several different playstyles was super fun and really engaging. I loved it. And you'd get a little attached to your favorite ones too, because it made them feel like they all had their own little personalities and attitudes in battle. This is the kind of system I'd hoped for in Wilds. Instead, though, we have the most dumbed down Palico we've probably ever had. We choose their armor and their main offensive weapon, and that's basically it. There's no more customization, no more specialization, nothing at all. It's boring, frankly. Really boring, and bitch basic by comparison to the other games, which is a sin all of its own, just being less interesting, more boring. But again, in practical terms, in the gameplay, in the hunt, They are way too powerful. And I think they're making a lot of newbie hunters lazier because of that. They're lazier about maintaining their own health and status cures and such. Because these Palicos are so efficient at rapidly curing you of status stuff and rapidly filling up your health. I love the Palicos. They're cute and charming little critters, but rather sadly in Wilds, I've actually spent the last 20 hours or so of my game time just leaving Riker, that would be my Wilds Palico, out of the hunt. I only invited him back onto the team yesterday, in fact, while I was preparing my notes for this very video. And yeah, you can really feel the difference they make. And it's not a good difference. It is not a fun difference. They need a huge nerf. And they need player-bound restrictions on which tools they can use. Let us make them just a trapper. Or just a healer. Or just a, distraction. And let us do like we could in Wilds and choose how they behave in Hunt, whether they're always by your side or nearby, or whether they deliberately, go around to the other side of the monster to be a better distraction and, pincer movement and stuff like that. Let us do more with them. Let us control them more. Let us customize them in way more ways about how they behave on the field of battle. Now, about the Seikret. I like how it's become kind of a mobile replacement for the guild box. I think that makes a lot of sense and a much more open field gameplay approach that they're trying to encourage here. But a lot of people are whining and complaining loudly about the pickup service, the Seikret recovery thing, being able to just press a button and whistle for a super fast recovery pickup after you get beefed by a monster. Yeah.
Seikret Recovery needs some kind of a drawback, because I see people just getting saved from the clutches of death being completely reckless, and it's like, you need to have some kind of a roar or something that keeps him away. Like, if the monster roars, Seikret gets scared, runs away, there's a cooldown before he can come back, something like that. Monsters enraged, Seikret can't come too close, it's too dangerous.
How about you just can't call it when you're flat on the ground, because your hunter's incapacitated, he can't whistle. And that would mean that you have to get out of the insta kill. You have to time it. You're just removing
Seikret Recovery.
I agree with Gaijin on this one. We just need to remove it. It should never have been in the game. I don't think there's a half measure here to fix it. Ruri suggested that maybe we put some kind of limit on it. I guess some sort of stamina or cooldown system maybe, so you can't constantly use it all the damn time. Or make it so roar's interrupted or something. I don't think that will fix any of the issues in any practical, useful way, frankly. I've seen people, self-proclaimed veterans and the like, from the content creator community, complain and whine about how easy the game is. Pre-release this is, when they had their review copies and stuff. But then on launch day, I went to their streams and I watched them play. And I targeted very specifically people I knew that I saw pre-launch complaining about how easy the game is. I was going to watch to see how they played. And you'll never guess what I saw. I saw many of them, most of them, in fact, constantly using Seikret Pickup. And every single time they got knocked back, and then they kept whining about how easy the game is. Which, come on, dingleberries, you are in control of the buttons you press. That is a choice you are making in your game. If you think this feature makes the game too easy, stop fucking using it. I am now closing in on 100 hours of gameplay in Wilds. Frankly, it would have been a lot more by now, but I've been in a depressive slump thanks to my bipolar disorder, and I literally haven't had the energy to play the game as much as I would have liked, or have the energy to sit upright in a chair for more than 10 minutes at a time. Hooray, bipolar depression, what a nightmare. I'm still not okay, by the way, for those of you who care and wondering. I'm feeling really crappy right now, but I'm doing my best to do an energetic delivery of what I want to talk about here. It's going to wipe me out for the rest of the day, just so you know. That's what I'm going through. But in those 100 hours of game time so far, I've literally, and I mean literally, never once used Seikret Pickup after being downed by a monster. Not once. Not ever. You know why? Because I do think it makes the game too easy. So just like how I eventually started leaving my Palico behind to boost the challenge level this early in the game's life, I decided before the game even launched, thanks to the beta experience, that I would simply not use this option. If I got downed, I wouldn't call for my Seikret to pick me up again. And yeah, I can already hear a certain type of person leaving the comments along the lines of, well, telling people not to use in-game features just so it can be harder artificially makes those features bad game design. Which, oh my god, that is such a stupid argument. Like, and I mean the kind of stupid that makes me wonder if you frequently need help operating doorknobs. It's clearly coming from people who are not gamers. They're just not real gamers. Because I can't imagine any, actual gamer, a hobbyist gamer, a passionate gamer, saying something like that and meaning it in earnestness. So they're either not real gamers, or they're doorknob-challenged morons, or they're just trolling. It has to be one of those, because the other option doesn't make any sense at all. And I find it especially hilarious how a subset of supposed Monster Hunter players are screeching at other people that not using certain in-game mechanics to make the game artificially harder for themselves is stupid. When over on the other side of the fence, I watched in real time Elden Ring elitists mock and deride any player who would use a certain in-game mechanic that game had, claiming that they're not good at the game if they use it, that beating the game while using this built-in feature meant you didn't really beat the game at all. Oh, you only beat this boss by using this feature? No, you didn't really beat that boss. And if you know Elden Ring, you know I'm talking about Spirit Ashes. For those that never played Elden Ring, Spirit Ashes are kind of like a summonable, ghostly AI-controlled battle companion thing, kind of like Palicos in a way. And despite being a core game mechanic, you will not struggle to find Elden Ring players who insist that using this feature at all is basically like cheating. It was all over that community. So yeah, when I see supposed Monster Hunter players insist that you must use any and all mechanics the game has, otherwise it's bad game design, and that ignoring any given feature or mechanic to make the game more challenging for yourself means the game is quote-unquote badly designed, it's just fucking hilarious to me. It's so dumb. All of that said, while I do say that if you don't like it, don't use it, as in fact I don't, I lead by example here, I walk the walk, I do also personally think the Seikret Recovery pickup mechanic was a mistake to include. And I do believe it is making people worse at the game, or preventing them from getting better at the game, perhaps is a better way to put that. Because part of the wonderful intrinsic dance that is on offer in Monster Hunter's exquisite combat mechanics is not just learning to avoid damage or knowing, where to go stand to do the most damage or where the weak spots are and all that kind of stuff, but it's also knowing what to do after you receive damage. Like the attacks that will knock you down or knock you back and down, for example. There's a lot of times when you just need to get back up as quickly as you can, reposition and re-engage. But there are some monsters who will have nasty follow-ups to knockdown attacks. So learning what and when these are and deliberately staying flat on the ground to avoid that follow-up damage is a key skill to learn as you become an expert hunter. It is knowledge and skill in use to avoid often brutal damage instead of the Seikret pickup option, which is nothing more than press this button as soon as you go down to instantly escape. I think it's doing the game's mechanics, and therefore the players, a complete disservice to trivialize the options that you have when you're knocked down like this. It's not just about making it quote-unquote too easy, it literally makes it less fun and less interesting. And that's why I think this mechanic was a mistake to include at all. It does nothing but diminish the experience, not enhance it or expand it in any way. Compare this, for example, to a very similar complaint made about the wire bug recovery in Rise. We had a very similar set of arguments about that when Rise came out. A lot of people said the exact same things we've been saying. It makes it too easy to escape follow-up damage. And of course, in response to that, the answer was, well, don't use it then. If you think it makes it too easy, stop using it. However, the wirebug recovery was more complicated than that. It was an intrinsic part of how the combat worked in Rise. It was a better balanced system overall. The wirebugs, for a start, were on cooldowns, so you had to have one ready to use it at all for a wirebug recovery. But more so, and far more interestingly than that, there were several monsters, including the flagship of the base game, Magnamalo, who could, and indeed would, punish the use of wirebug recovery to throw combo moves at you. They had follow-up moves specifically designed to target people using wirebug recovery, often the result of a near-guaranteed cart, in fact. So it became super dangerous to use wirebug recovery at the wrong time. So you then had to know when it was safe to use a wirebug recovery move, and also in which direction it was safest or smartest to zerp in. The wirebug recovery then became a tactical system of its own, and required knowledge and experience to capitalize on it. And in this way, it became fun and interesting, and expanded the mechanics of the game, not reduced them, which is what the Seikret pickup does. It reduces the mechanics. When Rise introduced the Palamute, people complained that because you could sharpen your weapon while mounted and running around on the back of your doggo, at speed, and kept you safe the entire time you were sharpening, instead of having to traditionally kneel down in one spot, locked down for several seconds, well, that made the game too easy as well. And the answer was, well, don't do that then. There's nothing stopping you sharpening the traditional way if you feel that's more of a challenge for you. This one was more of a grey area to me. Given the overall speed of Rise in general, I thought it was mostly fine, even though I personally very rarely used it, outside of several specifically highly mobile and aggressive monsters. Or obviously sharpening while moving between zones after the monster relocated between engagements. Then it just became sort of a really handy quality of life feature. But I often took pride in sharpening the traditional way, finding a safe spot, doing my brave sharpen, as it were, sitting right under the monster's tail or something. But that was just me kind of showing off and being goofy. But in Wilds, we can also sharpen on Seikret back, which means, again, we can also do that quality of life thing and sharpen while traveling between monsters while they zone. That's pretty handy. But in combat, because of the slower, heavier pace of Wilds versus Rise, I do think this diminishes it a little bit. So, once more, I, personally, have simply chosen to almost never sharpen on Seikret back, at least while in mid-fight. I enjoy the challenge of positioning and predicting the monster to find a safe spot to do it in. Plus, Wilds lets you cancel a sharpen by rolling out of it, and the sharpening happens progressively, not just all at once at the end of the animation, which I feel like is a decent balance of these mechanics. But, like Rise, once in a while, with very mobile and highly aggressive monsters, especially in tighter spaces, I will use the Seikret to sharpen. Especially if I'm on a multiplayer hunt and my mess up by being too cocky about when I sharpen, causes a cart and diminishes the hunt for other people. I'll do it then usually. But the other option is, of course, if there's nowhere to safely sharpen without mounting up, or getting a guaranteed wallop, I'd ordinarily just keep going with low sharpness till a zone happens. Very often I'll just do that instead, kind of out of brute stubbornness and determination. But for those players without self-control enough to choose to not use mechanics they think make things too easy, or to new players who are just using the tools at hand, I don't think mobile sharpening diminishes the fight in any meaningful mechanical way. At least not in ways that would make other people worse hunters, or lazier hunters, really. I mean, sure, it's easier, but unlike the Seikret recovery pickup, it doesn't really diminish anything important, I don't feel. I mean, it's not honestly really that difficult, and it's nothing, skillful or fun or interesting, just to run away for a bit and maybe hide behind a tree for 5 to 7 seconds while a sharpening animation happens. That's just opportunity. That's not a high skill thing. That doesn't require deep knowledge of the game to do. Know what I mean? But I really hope that the Wilds devs take note going forward, as we get more and more updates, that they take note from what the Rise dev team did. And as we start getting title updates in a few weeks, with the promise of a new level of monster, ones of formidable strength at a level above tempered, maybe they'll be smart enough to put in mechanics with these new monsters, these more challenging monsters, that will punish people who use Seikret Recovery. Just like how the more challenging monsters in Rise and Sunbreak would punish thoughtless use of Wirebug Recovery. I really hope so anyway. Also, God, please nerf Palicos. I want to hunt with my Palico. Riker is wonderful, but not when he trivializes so much of the hunt. I just gotta leave him behind. Please, nerf them. Give us way more options for them. They need to change. Anyway, thanks for listening. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the down below as usual. I am Blunty. Thank you to the patrons, and we'll catch you next time.